Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life, a podcast where we discuss the women's basketball collegiate recruiting process and transition from high school to college. I'm your host, Elsbeth Bierman. Our guest today is Coach Sarah Assante. Sarah played for 4 years at St. Joseph's College of Maine, graduating in 2015. She started her coaching career in 2016 as an assistant at Southern Maine Community College. From 2017 to 2019, Sarah was an assistant coach and assistant strength and conditioning coach at Regis College. Then from 2019 to 2021, she was an assistant at Washington and Lee University. From 2021 to 2023, Sarah was an assistant at Dartmouth College, and in 2023, Sarah was named a WBCA 30 Under 30 honoree in recognition of her contributions to her profession on and off the court, which is pretty amazing, so congrats on that. Finally, in 2023, Sarah found her current home as an assistant at Bryant University. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
And, you know, one of my favorite parts about doing this podcast is really doing the prep work. And I get to research and learn about just the experiences of all the coaches I interview. And because of the nature of the profession, there's a lot of moving around, which I understand can be daunting for the coaches. But for me, honestly, it means that you have a broader range of experiences to speak from. And I always love it when a coach has a few colleges on their resume, just because I think that makes for advice that is most likely applicable to just a wider range of people. So
yeah,
for sure.
Been around. I also spent some time in California during the interim period. I trained professional athletes, WNBA players for a little bit too. So
I did see that. I meant to include that, but I was like, I just didn't for some reason. So
yeah, no.
You know what? Let's talk about it right now. It was like Diana Taurasi, right? Cool.
Yeah. No, I between my time before. During the Regis stint and WNL stint, I spent some time in California training professional athletes. It was one of the men's coaches that I used to know a long time ago reached out to me and was like, "Hey, would you be interested in, moving to California for a little bit and training with a former alumni of his?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not? Like, that sounds phenomenal." And
right.
It was cool. And I mean, the reason why I got back into college, I got the opportunity to potentially go, stay in the professional side and work with an NBA team. But I don't know. I just miss the college feel and working with that age of range of kids, because I know you can make more of an impact in 18 to 22-year-olds and 16 to 22-year-olds, because in the recruiting process, you're creating that relationship. And I don't know. I just missed that component. So I got back into the college world very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And you were like, twist my arm, why don't you? Sure, I'll come to California and train.
Yeah. Living in LA, I was like, all right, that's perfect. But no, it was a good time.
Very cool. All right, so let's just get into the recruiting side. So what is the first thing you notice about a student athlete? What kind of draws you in?
Yeah, I mean, I think through my years, originally when I was younger, I looked for like confident kids that like presented themselves really well. When you walk on, they have a presence on the floor. But as you get through the recruiting process and you learn about kids, and, just because they might look confident on the floor doesn't mean that they're a very extroverted person. Sometimes it's introverted. And I think also when you're trying to make up a team, you need to have a variety of type of kids. And, so through my years and my times in different areas, I've learned that, you can't just look for the same type of kid always, because, when you have too many of the same, they sometimes might not mesh that well. And also, like, it's a learning process for them in terms of communicating and understanding, people from different areas of the world and in the country. So, but yeah, presence is a big thing for me when I'm sitting on the sidelines. I want kids that hustle. I want kids that do the extra play, like the dirty work, and, we'll dive on the ground for balls, communicate. They move efficiently and effectively. They're not just, active when the ball's in their hands versus, if they're, sitting on the wing and a post entry happens, like, are they standing there or are they moving? Well, that's something that I really look at, when it comes to sitting on the sidelines. And then in the recruiting process, when you're calling kids and talking to them, I don't know, I want kids that are engaged, and, they might've done a little bit of research on your school. And, I think that's important as well. And you can be quiet and introverted but still seem interested, versus some kids, they get on calls and they don't have any questions, they're not engaging, and that it's hard to have form that relationship on the phone or on FaceTime. So that's kind of what we look for.
Yeah. And when you were talking about like on the court, I just think of like a tool belt, right? Like you want a hammer, a screwdriver, like all of those different tools.
Yep.
And sometimes I think on the athlete side, they may not recognize that. They're like, "Oh my gosh, Brian was at my game
Mm-hmm.
and they might be really good, but it's like that's just not what we need this year." And so
Mm-hmm.
just to recognize that it's about fit two ways and it's also year by year. So that's something that's really important, I think, to just point out as well. But yeah, I love that answer of even just your progression of like what you used to look for versus what you look for now. I think that's pretty cool too. And when you or you said something, okay, you were talking about like phone calls and stuff.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that kids maybe should be asking? Or like how if I'm nervous and I'm introverted, it's like I have personality, but like I'm not sure how to show it or whatever. Like what advice do you give to somebody in that situation?
Yeah, it's funny. I talk to my players about this. We talk about transferable skills, and when I was at Washington and Lee University, and during the COVID year, I mean, we really tried to talk to our players and try and still give them valuable lessons of, what you're learning on a basketball court isn't just your physical ability to put the ball in the hoop or to play defense, but it's the transferable skills they're going to be able to take with you. Well, whether you go play professionally or whether you go into a business world or medical world or just the next chapter of your life, like to be able to communicate efficiently and effectively is super key. When you're trying to develop both on and off the court. And I think with phone calls, a lot of people think in the recruiting process when people are talking and engaging in conversations, kids are processing and trying to think about the next question that they're going to answer as opposed to just engaging in that moment of that conversation. Like you're listening intently and then you're trying to pick up, what I do when kids talk or, they're talking about school and they're talking about, their math test. And instead of moving on to the next question, because that's the question I have written down, I might ask a second question or a follow-up question to really engage with that type of conversation. So, I mean, whether it's the normal conversations or normal questions of, what's a typical day look like, or, how many, what's the practice style look, or, how do you play, or how's the coaching staff? Like, what do you think? Like when the coaches explain themselves of like, oh, I'm a coach that loves skill development. And, we talk about, working hard and detail oriented. I would love kids to then ask a follow-up question because that tells me that they're listening to actually what I'm saying, as opposed to they ask it and then they're like, okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
Next question.
It's like, yes, I
uh,
asked the question I needed to ask. You answered. Now we're moving on.
Yeah. And I think on the coach's side too, like I think sometimes, we make, when I tell you hundreds of calls a year, thousands of calls actually, I think sometimes we can, and in my earlier stages of the recruiting process, when I was younger, I did the same thing. I'm like, okay, I need to ask these kids like
Hmm.
6 questions. And like, that's what my head coach wants to know. And I would just ask to ask as opposed to then like you learn through, people that you meet on the recruiting trails and, the various the places that I've been like, no, kids want to feel valued. Kids want to feel like they're not just a number. So when you engage in that relationship and you build it, you're going to put yourself in a better situation to land that kid or that kid to come to your university or college, or even not. Like we're in the transfer world, so you might create a great relationship with a kid and they decide to go somewhere else, maybe because they didn't do their homework, they don't love it, or it's just not the right fit at the time, and they're like, hey, I really loved my relationship with Coach Sarah. Like I'm gonna go in the transfer portal, I'm gonna reach out to her, and see if I can rekindle that. Like that's those relationships that we're building, and that's why I say it takes 2 years really to like create that relationship with college coaches and that prospective student athletes, because it's a relationship, and it's not one conversation, it's not one visit that's going to sell you on that school, or it shouldn't be, in my opinion. I
Hmm.
think you should visit as many schools as possible. I think you should talk to as many coaches as possible to really figure out what you like, because a lot of kids make a decision based on a coach making them feel like they're the most magical person in the world. And at the end of the day, that's our job is to make sure we create those relationships, but we're also, you might be that kid that won, but we're also talking to probably 20 people that are also in your position. So you gotta find the right fit for yourself.
Yeah. And I think that was excellent advice that you gave about like listening and just asking a follow-up question because I can even imagine, like, even in this conversation, to be completely transparent, I was I was about to like move on to the next question. I was like, wait, why am I going to move on? Like, let me just ask her a follow up to the question or the answer that she just gave. And it's like, yeah, it's about that relationship. So I think that's excellent advice. And that's an easy way to have a conversation or build that relationship, especially if you're nervous, is just, it sounds simple, but it's not always easy. Just
Oh
like
yeah.
listen to what they're saying and then ask them a question based on what they just said. So I think that is definitely excellent advice. And I
Oh,
know,
even
go
even
ahead.
even when I was at WNL, and I got my jump to coach Division 1 at Dartmouth, I like was nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm working with a different level of kid.
Hmm.
What's the phone call going to be like? And again, I'm very transparent. Like I don't what I say is what I feel. So, I get on the call and I like end the call and I'm like, I'm still talking to 16 to 18
Exactly.
year old kids. Like it doesn't matter if they're better at basketball or they
Right.
play at a different program that sends kids higher. Like you're still talking to kids and you're still trying to create relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's one thing that I think, I don't know, for me, like if I think about it and I try to put myself in the mindset of like a 16-year-old kid,
Mhm.
I think, oh my gosh, they're Division 1 or they're Division 2 or Division 3, whatever it is. And you're like, you think that that coach is like on this pedestal or something, or like there's something about them or something that makes them extra special. And it's like, no, you're really just creating a relationship. And just to
Exactly.
like bring it back to its basic form and like kind of humble yourself a little bit of just, no, it's just a human being that I'm going to have a conversation with and see if we can mesh in a
Mhm.
way that makes me feel comfortable to spend more time with them or spend the next like 4 years or whatever with them. So
Exactly.
yeah, I think that's a great perspective to have for sure. Um, so can we talk about a little bit of maybe your focus, not the cycle, but kind of the cycle of like right now we are in February of 2024. I almost said 2023. We are
I'm
in
with you.
we are in February 2024. Like what is your focus right now or where are you putting your energy for the recruiting process? And I know that
Yeah.
might be different in like 3 months or 4 months, but like let's talk a little bit about right now. Where does that focus look like?
Yeah, I mean, we just took over specifically here at Bryant University. We just took over this program this past season. So we have a kind of a lopsided, team roster. We have 6 seniors, we have 2 juniors, we have one sophomore, and then 5 freshmen on our roster. So
Hmm.
at some point, and I'm the recruiting coordinator. Like that's how I operate. Our recruiting cycle. So I have to figure out a way to get us from being, top heavy, bottom heavy, and having nothing in the middle, in terms of numbers, not
Right.
necessarily
Yeah.
kids. Like
Yeah.
trying to even that back out. So right now we're in the phase of talking to 2025s and 2026s, trying to get out to as many tournaments slash high school games as possible. The ones that we, watched this summer and this past fall. Trying to make sure we're doing our due diligence of still maintaining that relationship and talking to other coaches, trying to get out and seeing them play, although you can't see everyone play. So it's impossible, as well as with our
Yeah.
recruiting days. We only have so many recruiting days we can get out on the road.
Right.
Um, but we're doing that as well as the transfer portal, because like I said, because we want to try and fill that sophomore junior class just a
Hmm.
little bit, just so it's not so imbalanced. Because if we keep on filling just the spots that we have open from a year to year basis, like we can't bring in 6 freshmen and then only two, for the 2026 class, and then only
Right.
one for the 2027 class. That's just not how you can be successful in this business and in creating a culture and a program. So yeah, right now it's relationships, checking in of their high school seasons, trying to start collecting information on what team are you playing with, are you staying with your team, are you switching AAU programs, and then potentially trying to get kids to campus. Like we have a big recruiting day this coming Saturday. We have an alumni game, but we're trying to invite as many 25s, 26s from our area, that can get there easily on a Saturday. But yeah, we're transfer portal to even out those two middle classes, as well as getting ready for the spring AAU track.
Yeah, I think when you like take over a program or it's just like you're trying to I don't want to say rebuild, but you're just trying to revamp the program a little bit.
Yep.
Like recruiting is just that weight that is like constantly ever present.
Yeah.
And not saying that if you get into a groove or whatever, that it's not always present because it is always present, but it just has to be like, I just imagine you're just running around all the time, just trying to coordinate this or that, or trying to talk to a kid or trying to like be at two high school games in one night. One's playing at 5, one's playing at 7. It's 20 minutes away. So I'm just going to try to drive all of these places.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I just imagine that right now it's just maybe just top of your mind, especially if you're like the recruiting coordinator trying to figure everything out. So this is kind of a left turn, but I just thought of it.
Mhm.
So if you think about, well, actually, this is a new team, so maybe you don't know the answer. So I'm not going to ask that question, I don't think.
Oh, you can go
But
for it. It doesn't matter. It's up to you.
all right, well, it's kind of a moot point, but I'll ask it, and if you answer it however you want to answer it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when if you think about the current roster, what's the percentage of kids that made first contact, or maybe you can think
Mhm.
about this from your experience too.
Yeah.
So the kids who made first contact to you versus you made first contact to them, what's that percentage look like?
That's a great question. I think probably like a 60-40 split of, 40% are the ones that made initial contact, 60%, just in my time of recruiting throughout the years.
Hmm.
I don't know. I was actually talking to a friend the other day. I was at a tournament in New York, and he's like, we always go through every email. And like, when I was in my younger days, I'm like, I'm not going through these emails. Like we get, oh, you don't even want to know how many we get a
Yeah.
day. And then you're trying to do your job, you're trying to maintain your current roster and, create those relationships and trying to win games and
Yeah.
trying to, help these kids, in their everyday life. And then you're getting hundreds of emails. You're like, I don't want to go through these. But it's so important because he was like, yeah, like one of our best players came from they contacted us. And, if we didn't open that email and just check it out and do our due diligence, like, we probably would have missed that kid. And that's kind of stuck with me. And I've been doing it throughout the years, kind of begrudgingly. But now it's like, it's so important. And as well as creating relationships with AAU coaches, like that is probably the biggest thing I've learned from going, I started coaching at community college to that. Well, I started at high school, actually. It's community college to a couple of years in Division 3 to, professional and then Division 1. As AAU coaches, like it's so important to maintain those relationships. So if a kid's contacting you and you don't get back to them, like they took the time out of their day. And again, we know if it's an individual email or if it's a mass email too.
Yeah.
So like that also, weighs heavily on how I respond too.
Yeah.
But if I don't get back to a kid, like that looks poorly on our program of like, okay, like this kid took the time, the energy to look into Bryant, to look into wherever I was at the time.
Right.
And then they go back and tell their AAU coach like that coach didn't contact you. And I think that's one thing that coaches can differ from. Some coaches don't love the emails and they just want to go out and recruit the kids that they think that they want to recruit from those programs that they want to recruit from. And I think that's a big valuable lesson that I've learned over the years is, first contact kids also, are showing interest in the school that you are. And at the end of the day, you want kids that want to go to Bryant University.
Right.
Like, don't get me wrong. We want some kids that are like high major kids that might decide to, prioritize this or that or staying close to home versus going away. But, you also want kids that really love your school. Because at the end of the day, if they love your school and they love their experience, they're going to be able to talk highly of their experience and help other kids potentially join your program. So relationships. And, I think it's important for kids to do that first contact. Because you never know what might come of it.
Right. And so I think you kind of answered this, but I'll ask this question in this way too, of like, how can a student athlete who is in love with Bryant, they want to at least take a visit or something, how can they cut through some of that noise of just like piquing your interest?
Yeah, great question. I will always tell every recruit that contacts me to, again, whether this is what people do or people don't do, like I'm always like, just be patient. Like we have a lot of things that are happening. So if I don't get, and we're in the generation and the age of if you don't get a response immediately,
instantaneously, yeah,
kids can get upset or have a certain way or certain feeling of that. And I think it's, I think being patient and everybody's recruiting process is different. some kids might be making decisions immediately. Some people, might want to wait their time, and some people might not get picked up until this time around. Like there are seniors right now that are still looking for homes. And I always say, like, every timeline is different. So never equate your timeline to someone else's, because it's only going to put pressure on yourself to make it, but a potentially bad decision of going to a school just because you wanted to make a decision. But no, I think to answer your question, I think, yeah, sending an email, sending a follow-up email, maybe having your high school coach or your AAU coach reach out. And again, if it's to a school that you really care about, like I think if you're asking your AAU coach, your high school coach, can you send out 50 emails or make 50 calls to all these schools? I'm sure that the AAU coach also is probably not going to do that. I think that's a lot, but I think AAU coaches, and what I tell coaches is like, do your homework. Like if you really like this school and it's really important to you, then try and make those extra efforts of, having other people make contact and, character reference. I know it sounds like cliche, but, I think having someone else call on your behalf is really important. And that goes back to my coaches' relationships with AAU coaches. Like if I get a call from a certain program, I take my time and I'm like, okay, I will look at this kid because you're calling me, as opposed to, if I don't have a relationship with an AAU coach and someone calls me randomly, like I'm going to listen. Cause again, I learned my lesson. Like you never just, throw away conversations, but then I'm like, well, is this person lying to me? Like, cause some coaches, you just want to, place their kids, and whether it's a good fit for them or a good fit for that kid or for the college coach, like you just have to weed through that. So relationships with AAU coaches and high school coaches are really big in this industry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too, because it's like if you hear from like 3, 4 people, this is a great kid, blah, 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 it's like that starts to really resonate. And it's not just one person, it's not just two people, it's multiple people who are vouching for this kid. That definitely, yeah, definitely goes a long way. So when you're so on your staff, you said you're the recruiting coordinator. So what does your process look like to kind of vet those kids initially to like see if they've made it to like this? I think of it as rounds, like first round me, second
Yeah.
round is this. Like what's your process or your school's process, and in your experience, what do those different rounds look like for you?
Yeah, I honestly, it depends on the head coach I'm working for. So I think, in this first year, Coach Lynn, she's a first time head coach too. So not only is this a new program, granted, she played at Bryant University. She got her coaching start at Bryant
Oh,
University. So this
cool.
is home. So she knows
Yeah.
it. And it's cool to have that experience with her and help support her, because her passion for this place is like none other. Like, you work for some coaches and like they love the
She is
school.
a bulldog, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I'm like, when people are like, wow, you like really love it. I'm like, no, this is authentic. This isn't her putting on a show. Because some coaches will put on a show for you, and then at the end of the day, they don't really care about the university that they might be working for at the time. But I think it's really important to know what your head coach is looking for. Because it's at the same time, like when I'm out on the road and I'm recruiting, if I'm just recruiting what I like, that
Mhm.
might not necessarily jive with what my head coach is looking for at the time. So, we have weekly meetings, weekly recruiting meetings, check-ins. Are you like this kid? Like I'll send some film to them. All right, yeah, get in contact with their coach. And then I'll do the due diligence, me and the other assistants that we have. Like, we do our process. We all cover different regions as well. And again, we have some crossover. Don't get me wrong. Being in this industry and living in all up and down the East Coast, I have made a lot of contacts in little areas. But no, I think it's really important to know what your head coach is looking for. And once you feel that, and then you have those relationships with those AAU coaches, I think that's when you kind of get past first round, second round. Like, the first thing is make contact, whether the coach is making contact to the player, the prospective student athlete, or vice versa. And from there, like get on campus. Like if that's something that you're really interested in, like that school, you need to get on their campus. You need to go to a practice. You need to go to a game. You need to see the environment. And then from there, hopefully that coach can come watch you play. But yeah, having as much contact as possible, but also healthy contact. Like I can't, as much as I love, every coach, every kid that I'm recruiting, it's hard to talk to them on a day-to-day basis. Also, like from a college coach side, like I don't want to be, talking to this kid every day and this kid getting annoyed, but like doing it and vice versa. Like sometimes kids contact me every single day and I'm like, I can't have contact with, hundreds of kids every single day. That's just like impossible time wise. So I think
You would
getting through the
never stop
rounds,
looking at your phone.
no, literally, I'm like, the amount of contacts I have in my phone, like some coaches in different sports are like amazed of basketball recruiting because it's just a different beast. Which you don't think about until you hang out with other assistant coaches at the schools you work for, with different sports, and they're like,
Oh, right. Yeah.
you have to do all that. I'm like, oh yeah. And it costs a lot of money to go out recruit. So you have to have the right budget in order to have coaches.
Yeah. So you mentioned like going on visits, things like that. Like when people come to your campus, like what are the things that you're looking for in terms of like red flags, green flags, either
Yeah.
official or unofficial visit?
Yeah, I think, again, we talked about earlier, I want confident kids. And again, whether you're extrovert or introvert, like you can pick up on, whether a kid can have an engaging conversation by themselves or if their parents are doing all the talking. I mean, and you might laugh, but you also know this because you were a college coach. Like there are some parents that will speak for their kids. Like as a coach, you'll ask a kid a question like, hey, like, what are you thinking so far? Like, what do you like about campus as we're taking a walk on campus? And immediately the parent answers for them. And I'm like, like it's one of those, like you want to engage in as much as you're recruiting the kid, you're also recruiting the parents.
Yeah.
And vice versa. If you bring a kid on campus or like onto your team and onto your program, you're also bringing parents with them. As much as like coaches want to say like we don't deal with parents, like in this day and age, maybe when we played, parents or coaches have to deal with parents, we have to deal with parents, and it's a big piece of the recruiting process. So we want to make sure parents are allowing their kids, to advocate and talk for themselves and to be able to articulate, as well as like, as they're walking, again, it's all about engagement for me. It's like, oh, are they actually looking in the classrooms when we're walking by? Are they saying hello to professors that are saying hi to them? Like some professors, our community is phenomenal. We're a walking type based campus, close knit. I've only been working here for, let's say, 9 months right now. Like the amount of faculty members that will stop me and be like, oh, I saw your game, or like, you guys are doing really well. Or, Mariona, our best player, like really loves what you guys are doing, the change that has happened, with your program.
Yeah.
If we're walking with a recruit and that professor engages with that student athlete and asks them a question, if that kid gets a little nervous, which is okay, but doesn't know how to like just say hi and like, it's great to meet you, that's can be a red flag. Or if kids are on their phone. Like again, you would think kids are set up and understand like, not how to act, because we want people to act authentically.
Yeah.
But those social etiquettes of like, you're trying to talk to a kid and they're on their phone or they're looking up and not paying attention to what you're talking to, or again, if parents are talking. So those are some red flags, but some green flags are when kids show their personality. Again, whether you're extroverted or introverted, like, whether they're watching a practice and they're smiling and they're like sitting up and they're engaged as opposed to leaning back and not really paying attention. Those are red flags versus green flags for us. I think when kids say, I really loved campus, again, that follow-up question, oh, what did you like about it? Are they just saying they like it because they know that's what they're supposed to say? Or are they actually remembering, actually the Fisher Center, the student center was really cool and I love this part of campus? Like those are important.
Yeah. And sometimes they'll say, this is just like a funny aside, sometimes they'll say the most randomest things like, I loved how the trees were next to each other because of the shadow that we had or something, or like the lighting was great.
Oh, it's pretty funny the things that kids say. And we have like a fountain on campus. We have a pond in the middle of campus and a fountain. And we joke around because my head coach, again, she went there. She loves the fountain. Anytime the fountain's on, like we're like, hey, the one thing you can say you love is the fountain.
Yeah.
And like we try and make a joke of it. But yeah, no, it's being able to be engaged in the moments that you're there.
Yeah, for sure. So if you think about like your role versus a student athlete's role in the recruiting process, from your perspective, what is kind of the things that you expect of yourself, and then what are the things you expect from the student athlete? And I know you've said a lot about engaging in relationships, so if it's the same answer, that's cool, but just wanted to frame the question this way.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think my responsibility, again, is to be authentic. The 100 kids that I like, obviously I want them all to like Bryant University.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I like it. That's why I'm working here. I'm not working here just to work here. So yeah, I'm going to try and be authentic as possible, because I might love this kid and I might have a great relationship with that kid, but this school might not be the best for them. What if they want a very specific degree? I'm not going to sell them on, oh no, but if you do this as a major, then, once you graduate for 4 years, you can go to grad school and then get on the right track. Like, no, if they know exactly what they want and we don't have that, then I'm not going to try and sell them the dream. And I think, that's something that differentiates, at least my coaching staff from a lot of other coaching staffs. And I'm not saying it's the right way or the wrong way. It's just the way that we do it here is back to my original point. We want kids to love Bryant when they leave, when they come and when they leave. So my job is to be authentic. And, I'm not trying to put on a show when we're in practice and we're intense. Like we talk about detail and discipline on a continuous basis. And, we're trying to build a program. We're trying to win games, but we're trying to build a program and culturally and trying to nip things in the butt of, it might have, kids might have been able to do that last year, but, we're trying to make some changes. And from what we see that can make us successful. So if we're coaching and you don't like the way that we're coaching, like that's important. And we tell kids, if it's not for you, it's okay. Like we're not, yeah, of course, we might be a little hurt that they don't like it, but at the same time, like that's important for that student athlete. So vice versa, I think it's on the student athlete side, they also have to be authentic and they also have to figure out what works best for them, which is, to go visit as many schools as possible and talk to as many coaches as possible to understand what your likes and don't like. So some people are like, I don't like cities, I like small towns, or vice versa. Like I like, small towns versus cities, but like it's still about the college feel and how it makes you feel. And we talk about fit. Like you might step on a campus and it might feel phenomenal, but you still should ask around and you should feel wanted. You should feel like it's a right fit for you. And you should ask as many questions as you can during that time while you're on campus or you're talking to, people that know Bryant about what their experiences were. Because if you go to a school just to play basketball and, God forbid that there's an injury or something that happens, and then you don't like the school, you're going to be miserable. And that's like, no one wants that. No one wants it. You only have 4 years. I mean, COVID kids have 5-6 years and I'm jealous of that, but you really only have 4 years of a college experience and you want it to be perfect. I mean, nothing's perfect, but you want it to be the best experience as you possibly can. So I think both sides need to be authentic. And if it's the right fit, it's the right fit. If it's not, then there's no hard feelings. And anytime a kid calls me and say like, I'm thinking I'm going to go to this school, like, I had a bad experience when I was a kid and I called the coaches because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to call and let them know that you're not going to the school instead of sending them a text or just like ghosting them.
Yeah.
And I had a bad experience where a coach got mad at me on the phone. Why would you be choosing this school over this, like over us, yada, yada, yada. And it's just like, I would never do that to a kid. I'm always like, I'm so happy. Like this is a hard, year and a half, 2 years of your life trying to make the right decision and having a million adults tell you what's the right decision. You got to make it for yourself. So, I wish you the best of luck and I can't wait to follow you. And again, that's that point of that relationship that I think is most important.
Yeah. And to speak on like that experience you had, it's like, I'm sure especially now the perspective of, oh, I definitely made the right choice. If that coach was going to get mad at me for something like that, it's like, what's going to happen when we get on the court or if we were to get on the court, things like that. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's, I'm sorry that happened. That sounds like, if I think about myself as like 17, 18 and somebody did that, it's like, oh my gosh, that would be not a good experience. But the one thing you said about, like if you got injured or something, I interviewed somebody else and the way that they framed the question, which I thought was awesome, was she said, we ask every single kid, what happens if basketball got canceled? It's like, would you still want to come to this school? And I said, that's a great way to frame it because that's something that actually happened. And it's like, it's not some ambiguous, like, well, I've never gotten injured, so that I'm not going to worry about that. It's like, no, basketball actually stopped.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, you can put yourself back in that frame of mind. So I think that's always a great question to ask too, because if you don't like the school, if you're only there for the coaches or whatever, not always good. But also you've moved around. It sounds like Bryant is you enjoy Bryant, you enjoy the coaching staff, but it's like, what if you left in a couple years and a kid that you were recruiting is like, oh, well, now that's a good fit. It's like, you don't want to ghost that coach or because you never know if they're going to be a coach where you want to play.
Exactly. Impressions are everything. And, one impression that might not matter to you can matter to, that person that's on the receiving end, or vice versa on the giving out side of things. It's just, you have to take every moment and appreciate it. And again, I feel like I'm being redundant, but it's all about like the way that you communicate. I think, if you can communicate efficiently and effectively, you're going to put yourself in a better situation overall. And that's how people see you as. I mean, it's equivalent to like how we met. We met at a recruiting event, and like we engaged in a small conversation, and then we coached against each other. And I saw you, a couple years later, you're coaching high school, and I gave you a hug, and then I'm on the podcast. Like, yeah. But have we ever hung out? No, but like, it's the way that you and I both interacted with each other. We knew it was good. And obviously our coaches liked each other too. So that was the icing on the cake.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, I just lost my train of thought, but I'm going to get back. Okay. So I'm looking at the time now, and I feel like we could just keep on talking forever, but I want to move forward towards like the transition to that first year. And I did, through my research, found out your strength and conditioning background. So I do want you to like filter this answer through that lens as well. But so like thinking about the transition from high school to college, it can be stressful for so many different reasons. But what are like some proactive strategies that you would recommend for athletes to excel on and off the court?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and I say this in the recruiting process when kids are visiting, we go to the strength room. I'm like, have you started lifting? Have you even entered that thought in your mind? And
what is a dumbbell?
Yeah, exactly. What is a squat?
Yeah.
Because I think that's the hardest transition. Like, there are some kids that are talented enough to, get on the basketball court and they're skilled and they can do it. But you're an 18-year-old. And again, in this day and age, some kids are playing 5-6 years of college basketball. Like, you might be playing against a 22, 23-year-old. Yeah. Like, the physical ability is something that separates a lot of kids, or I shouldn't say kids, young adults, college athletes. It's a long season. Like, yes, you play basketball year round. That's the new generational thing, is that, you maybe specialize in one sport, and you play that year round. But the way you practice in college and the way that you compete in college is a whole new beast and a whole new animal. So you have to understand how to take care of your body, because that also, the way you feel physically can also affect you the way you feel mentally. So I say it from the jump, like, if you're not lifting, if you're not, getting, mobility and understanding just the way to move your body, like, you need to start now, because that's going to be a big adjustment. And you're going to be in the weight room 3-4 times a week, for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. And some programs do longer. And some people, there's a variety of ways that you can, go amongst a school year and a basketball season. But that is something, the biggest thing of a transition. And I know I was a strength coach, and I know that's like my mindset, but I think it's big. And, right now we have 5 freshmen. One of them, is injured, but we have 4 that play. Like, they play significant minutes, and, they're in the tired phases of, February, we say, is a sink or swim month. Like, and right now our freshmen are like, wow, like, you said it, you said we needed to take care of our bodies, but, are they going to cut corners? Are they going to try and get out of an ice bath? Absolutely. Did I do it? Absolutely. But I think that's a big transition. And then on the academic side of things, we have study halls here. We do 6 hours a week in the first semester. And then, if you quote unquote graduate out of, study hall, if you have a good enough GPA after your first semester, you don't have to you limit your hours, or we reduce them to 2 hours a week for your second semester. And then once you maintain a certain grade point average, you don't have to be in study hall for the next 3 years. So it's not even study halls there to, actually make you study. It's about learning how to time manage. Because when you're in high school, you're in classes from 8 to 2, 8 to 3, whatever the day schedule is for you. And then you have practice right after, and then you go home and you eat dinner or whatever you're doing. In college, you might only have 2 classes. You might even not even have a class on one day. So, like, what are you doing with that time? And, we're traveling a lot. Like I said earlier, or before this podcast started, like, we are on the road Thursdays and then home on Saturdays, or vice versa. And, if you don't know how to study on the road and like get your work done early, you can fall behind. And I think that's also a stressor. And at the end of the day, like, I think old school, coaches are very much like, basketball is basketball. Like, you're here to play, you're here, you have a scholarship and you're here to play. But a lot of kids have a lot of things on their minds nowadays. And, yes, do I want them to be able to step into the lines and put everything away and aside and just be there for the, however long you're going to be on the court? Absolutely. But, that's not always the case. So we got to make sure that they're taking care of their bodies and their minds so they can be their best possible self when they're stepping on the floor.
Yeah, for sure. I know I always felt too that you have to get a good base on your body because basketball is such a long season and you need to be able to be durable throughout the whole thing. So, like you said, February, March, that's really when things need to turn up. And if your body is feeling it, you can't really play catch up. Then now you're just like dealing with what the situation is.
Yeah,
and you have to
exactly.
like find a way to make it through. And yeah, I totally agree about the time management piece. And I always felt that the most wasted time in a college person's day is the middle of the day.
Yes.
Because you can get caught sitting at the caf for 3 hours, just chilling, hanging with your friends, when it's like you could have been studying or planning for something for 2 hours. Like you still spend an hour there, but like 2 hours somewhere else. So yeah, I definitely think those perimeters, those structures definitely help for sure.
Yeah, and we talk to our upper class players about helping first years, helping sophomores,
Hmm.
because you've already done that, you've already experienced it, and that's again the way that we're trying to build our culture is everyone helping everyone, whether it's a peer of yours, whether it's someone that you don't really get to talk to on a day-to-day basis because they're not in your positional group, or whatever it may be. We're small. Basketball is a small sport, so 15
Yeah.
people, you talk to everyone on an everyday basis. But just thinking about other sports in general too, it's like no, uppers have to help the underclassmen because I think that can be a big beneficial of, you should be doing this, follow me, and being that leader.
Hmm. Yeah, we always like to call it like positive peer pressure.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like let's go to the library. That sounds like fun. It's like, okay, fine. First, second years just following down for the juniors and seniors into the library. It's like, yeah, you can be that type of community for each other.
Yeah.
So, um, I have a last couple questions that I ask everybody who comes on. And so the first one, what book or podcast would you recommend every incoming first year read or listen to before their first semester and why?
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of books. I'm a big book reader. I love reading and then giving books to people. But one thing, I have it right here actually. This is not the exact book that I would say to read, but the series of What Drives Winning. I think it's a phenomenal book by Brett Ledbetter. He works with all types of athletes, specifically prioritizes basketball,
Okay.
but a variety of sports. But they talk about what's really important, what drives winning, like how are you getting yourself mentally prepared. Like if you're a shooter and you go 2 for 10 on the night, and then quote unquote that's a bad shooting night or that's an okay shooting night. Are you really going to let how long does it take for you to put a shot up? 1 second. So are you going to let 8 seconds of a 40-minute game affect the other 39 minutes that you play? So there's a lot of great, exercises, thought-provoking, journaling that he, talks to student athletes about, and specifically high schoolers and college-age kids of, how do you put your mind in the best position to be successful and to win? And that's, there's a book for individuals, then there's a What Drives Winning Teams, and then there's a What Drives Winning Environment, and then there's a What Drives Winning, What Really Matters for coaches too. And like, another one that I'm reading right now, he just came out with this one. It's question-based leadership. It's like, are you going to tell kids what to do? Or are you going to try and ask the questions to help them start making those decisions? Because you never want a kid to ask you the same question over and over and over, or like never be able to, think for themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's something that's really important is like, no, like teach these kids how to ask questions maybe in a different way to help themselves be successful.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna have to check those out. Do you have a Goodreads account?
No, I don't.
I feel like I want to follow your Goodreads account, so we should get one.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my whole staff, we're big book readers and we share books.
Cool. And all right, so what is something about the recruiting process or transition to college that you believe that some other coaches might disagree with?
Honestly, this is a tough question. When you sent me the questions earlier, I think in terms of disagreeing, it's one of those like freshmen shouldn't play. They're like, there's a reason why freshmen don't play. Like,
Right,
I
right.
don't know. Like, I think that, or conversely, you're in the recruiting process and you're trying to, get this kid to commit to you and you're like, oh, you're going to play. And then they might not play. And it's okay if you don't play. Like, you're probably behind someone that has been preparing to play for the last 2 years. They had to
Yeah.
wait their turn. And that's something, nowadays we see on a day-to-day basis. Like, kids don't want to wait their turns. Kids don't want to, fight and compete and compete for those minutes. So they want it not necessarily to be handed to them, because don't get me wrong, they put their work in and they
Right.
know that they put their work in. But, I think in our program, what we do is everyone shows up, everyone has the same, I wouldn't say the same opportunity, but they have the same opportunity to seize the moments that they get. And if you waste those moments, that's on you. And I think with first years, sometimes they could feel like, oh, well, it's not my time to shine. Or some coaches might be like, we have a senior based team, they need to develop, I'm focusing on the, the uppers. No, I think it's who shows up on a day-to-day basis and competes. And, hey, that's why we play 4 freshmen. Like, if you would have asked me at the very beginning of the year, like, who's going to play for us, I would never have told you all 4. But they compete and it's fun. And that's who we want to recruit is people that compete. And, our seniors are also compete. Like, it's a cool environment that we're trying to build culturally of it's all about competing and loving to compete.
Yeah, for sure. So last one, any final words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think overall it's everyone's process is different. So never equate yourself to, your friends or people that you're seeing on Twitter or Facebook, or I'm aging myself, Facebook, or Instagram or whatever, TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, so I don't really know. But, I just think it's everything's a process, and trust your process and don't feel rushed. If coaches are pressuring you, I think that's something I can't stand that. I think it's already a hard enough process on them and on us. Like, don't get me wrong, like, sometimes we need an answer. It's because, like, we have another kid that might be waiting. But I don't know. I think it's trust your process and, be authentic and know what you're looking for. And if you might not know, take notes. Like, after you leave a place, after a visit, take notes, because if you're going to try and remember based off of, the feeling that you had, that can be really hard if it's been 6 months since you visited a school, as opposed to, on the car at home with your mom, dad, or your AAU coach, whoever you're riding with, just jot down some notes so it's fresh. Your thoughts are fresh and you can write them down so you can refer back to it.
Yeah, for sure. So if anybody wants to keep up with Bryant or anything like that, if you all have anything going on, where can they find you all?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest thing is follow our Twitter and our Instagram, Bryant WB basketball. I think our WB ball. I think it's fun. I think we put a lot of content, and again, we're a very, very authentic program. So you're gonna see the ups and the downs, and our emotions. We're very, like, animated coaching staff and an animated team. Like, we jump up, we're like getting worn down the bench to sit down just because we're like cheering on our team. So I think if you really want to see, what we're like, what Bryant women's basketball is about, follow our social media, as well as, come to a game if you're in town or if you want to come. Like, that's that initial contact. Reach out. I'm never going to say no. Like, we can give tickets out. Like, I'm never going to say no to a kid that wants to come visit.
All right, Sarah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're looking for more specific recruiting advice based on your situation, head over to hoopsthroughlife.com today to schedule your free 30-minute strategy session with me. We will discuss where you currently are in the recruiting process, where you want to go, and create a plan to get you there. Again, that's hoopsthroughlife.com, hoopsthroughlife.com. And if you have any questions for me or questions you want me to ask future guests, you can email me at l@hoopsthroughlife.com. That's EL@hoopsthroughlife.com. I look forward to hearing from you soon.